Let's pray, and then we'll get going. All right. Dear Heavenly Father, I want to thank you so much for this opportunity, Lord, just to talk about such a serious situation, Lord, and near to each of our hearts, Lord. And I just pray that you give me the words and the attitude to approach this, Lord, as you would see the best fit. In Jesus' name, amen. As we get going on this topic, I want to kind of lay a groundwork just for the approach of it. You know how, like, tonight we're talking about sharing the truth in love and how important that is to share it in love and to come from a place of genuineness. And the next 3 nights, we're going to be talking about a couple serious issues. We're talking about abortion. We're going to be talking about transgender, homosexuality. We're going to be talking about drugs and alcohol and those kind of issues. And those aren't issues you just come to with an arrogant attitude. You need to come towards them with a gentle spirit and with love. And when I was a junior higher, I started going to youth group and learning more about abortion, and it just didn't make sense to me that people would do that and commit abortion. And my attitudes towards it were kind of, I would say, harsh, critical, negative. Wrote a song about it, that kind of thing. Anyway, my mom, before that, had talked to me about it and then talked to me again about it. But she ended up having an abortion before I was born. So I want to tell you a really cool redemptive story that the Lord did in my mom's life and how this has affected me personally. Yeah, I was good looking back then too. It started from the beginning. So my mom actually got saved through me. I actually saved her, so it's pretty cool. It's not very often that you get to save your mom, so then you get saved through that. It's amazing. So I basically, was like my own witness to myself. It's pretty cool in some way. So I'm just kidding. Okay, so basically this is what happened. So my mom, she went to med school. She became a psychiatric nurse. She was married for 1 year and got divorced. After that, she lived in Boise, Idaho, and she had a friend of a friend, and okay, I'm getting on myself. She ended up getting pregnant before and then chose to have an abortion. A couple years later, when she was at the age 24, she ended up, she was working at the hospital in Boise, and she had a friend of a friend, had a one-night stand, and got pregnant. She was considering having another abortion. That was me. And she said, I was trying to find the journal this afternoon, but I couldn't find it for some reason, so the Lord knows. But I actually have my 24-year-old mother, like, telling me and talking to me, telling me that her journey, like, within months. It's so cool because she sounds so much younger and not as educated and just excited and confused, and she thought I was a girl, so she's calling me like her sweet baby girl and stuff. So anyway, she just had this intuition that I was a girl, but she was wrong about that one. Anyway, but before that, she was thinking about having an abortion with me, and she said the Lord did a miraculous work where she said, verbally spoke to her and spoke into her life in such a way that she said that it was almost like she heard the very voice of God. She said she doesn't know if it was an audible voice, but as close as it could possibly be to keep me and to not go through with abortion. So through that, she started searching for God in her life. And so she started searching for God, and she ended up finding the Lord. She started going to this church called Calvary Chapel, Boise. That church was less than 20 people at that time. I think she said 12 or something. And it was a meeting in a house at this point. It wasn't a big church or anything like that. And they're going to this small church, or Bible study, or whatever it was. And she got saved through that. And then she said, okay, Lord, if you really want me to keep this baby, you need to provide for me. And so there was this card that you see on the screen that was found. And I don't know exactly when she wrote this, but it says, the night before I received this card, I laid in bed and cried. My faith was wavering that night as I wondered how I was going to provide all that you needed. I had nothing for you, no clothes, no baby equipment, no maternity leave. As I laid in bed crying out to the Lord, I was begging him to forgive my unbelief. I went to sleep that night feeling forgiven and slept peacefully the next day. This card came in the mail. Before I looked inside the card, I just read the verse over and over. When I did open the card, there was a check for $3,000. I called the church and talked to Pastor Bob, asking him who gave it to me, and he kept saying God did. That money enabled me to take 3 months maternity leave and buy all the baby things I needed. That is the Almighty Lord that we follow. It says, this check received and designated for you and your baby. Praise the Lord. So it says $3,000. So the Lord intervened in a very powerful way in my mom's life through this. And what was interesting is when my mom called Pastor Bob, she said, did someone send it? Tell me who sent it. She goes, Lynette, we are a small church. Do you think we can afford sending $3,000 to you right now? It's not happening. This is from God. This is a miraculous work that God had done. My mom's roommate at that time got saved through it. She became like the second parent. She was also a nurse at the hospital my mom worked at. She became my Aunt Julie through that, because through the first few months of my life, the Lord ended up bringing her as a very important part of my life, and still is. And so she got saved. She ended up getting married to a pastor. All these great things. My aunt. Now my mom decided when I was about 7 months, I think it was 7 months, to move back to San Diego, where she grew up, and to move to El Cajon. She went to Calvary Chapel, El Cajon at that time, and she's single with a baby, living at my grandparents' house. And she put me in the nursery because they had like nursery care. And my mom said that she was there watching the worship, and she said she kept getting distracted by this guy who was leading the worship. She just thought he was attractive, and she kept thinking, I can't go anymore. So she decided in her heart that she wasn't going to get involved with anybody, so she was going to leave, and she wasn't going to, she didn't want to be, her mind to be distracted. So it's time for greeting time. She turns around, she shakes the woman's hand. She says, yeah, I moved here from Boise with my son. I'm a single mother. She goes, have you met Bob, our singles ministry leader? And then it was the guy on stage. So she's like, great, now he's single. Now I know he's single, and this is even worse. I definitely have to leave. So she goes, and then there is a 7-year-old kid named Jason in the Sunday school, or helping out in the nursery, or he'd be almost 8, helping out in the nursery, and he's holding me, and he says, I want Ryan to be my brother. And my mom's just like, what is this? Okay, just crazy. She finds out that's Bob's son, Jason, okay, from a previous marriage. Long story short, that they started dating. 3 months later, they get married, and that's my dad today, and has been my dad, and I have known nothing else since then. And the Lord has redeemed that story. But the reality is that there was a lot of brokenness for my mom leading up to that, and God has chosen to redeem that and to change that. And so what I want to say is this, is that when I start talking about abortion tonight, and I'm going to approach it in kind of a very critical way and an apologetics way, but I want you to know that I know there's a lot of girls in your schools that have had abortions. You know girls that have abortions. God can take that and turn it all around and do an amazing work and really do a beautiful thing. And then on top of that, I know that there's girls that recently in your school have found out they're pregnant, and I think it's an amazing thing that when a girl chooses to keep their child, and God can do amazing works through that and bring a man into their life or whatever it might be. As long as we're seeking Him, He's going to do an amazing work, okay? So I want you guys to know that, of how dear that is to my heart before we get going, okay? All right, so let's get going. Let's lay a biblical case for pro-life. Now, remember last night's session, you have different views of morality. The first one was an absolute view of morality, which was that there is a morality outside of us that is a standard. You guys remember that from last night? So that's the first thing. So we're going to look at in our Bibles. If you guys want to look these up in your Bible, you can. We're going to go through them kind of quick, but they'll be on the screen. God personally relates to the unborn. Job 31:15 says, "Did not He who made me in the womb make them? Did not the same one fashion us in the womb?" So you see, God was creating within the womb and relates in that way. Psalm 139:13 through 14. For you formed my inward parts. You covered me in my mother's womb. I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are your works, and that my soul knows very well. So even in your mom's womb, you're a person, right? Even from that point, you are a person. Jeremiah 1:5. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I sanctified you. I ordained you a prophet to the nations. So from the very beginning, from the very start, as we're going to be looking at conception, we see that God relates to the unborn. The equality of the unborn is mentioned in Exodus chapter 21 through 21, 22 through 23. If men fight and hurt a woman with child so that she gives birth prematurely, yet no harm follows, he shall surely be punished accordingly as the woman's husband imposes on him, and he shall pay as the judges determine. But if any harm follows, then you shall give life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, stripe for stripe. This is what it's saying. So if you had two men, they're in a fight, and for some reason the pregnant woman did not have enough sense to get out of the way, and the man fell on the woman or hurt the woman in some way, and then it caused her to go into labor, and then the baby died or was hurt during that, then that man's life would be taken from him for what he had done. God had saw that it was seen as murder. It was actually an act of murder to hurt a child within the womb. So we could say today that abortion is murder. It's the sin of murder. So we know that from God's word. Now let's start looking at other people's worldviews and how we can debate with them and maybe bring some sense to what their views are. Now, there are three forms of the pro-choice movement, okay? Three primary forms. The number one form, and this is the one you probably debate most of the time, is that the baby's not human, it's a fetus. We'll use those words, fetus, or different words. So it's not human yet. It doesn't have human rights. It's not a being yet. It's not a baby yet. They use words to disassociate the humanness of that baby, okay? The second case that, is what I would call justified abortion, okay? Justified abortion, and we'll be looking at what that is. And then the third type of pro-choice is modified pro-choice, which we'll be looking at, okay? So those are the three forms of pro-choice movement. So let's look at the first one. Are they cells or human? Is this a baby, a cell, or human? In most cases, those favoring abortion agree that humans are valuable. They disagree, though, on whether an unborn child is, in fact, an example of an innocent human person. So you need to remember that when you're talking with a pro-choice person, they believe human life is valuable. They just don't believe that that is a human. Does that make sense? That's where the debate usually begins. Now, there are some pro-choice people that don't value human life, period. You know, those are what we call sociopaths, and they're not really worth debating. But there's others that they just don't believe that it's a human at that point, okay? So, when does someone have human value? Now, it's amazing to me about this question because now people are starting to argue from Berkeley and other places about infanticide, which is being able to kill babies outside the womb and up to ages of 1 year old, considering that they don't have human value at that point even. So at one point do you become human, okay? That's where the argument's going to go. Now, some of the statements I'm going to make are going to sound kind of harsh, but it's only to kind of like stir up what we're going to be, to show the faulty thinking of the pro-choice movement, not to be gross on purpose, okay? All right, so arguments against the pro-choice movement. I'm sorry, I forgot to put one on the screen. Before the scientific case, I would like to call it the judicial case, okay, or the civic case for against pro-choice. Many will use the word murder to describe abortion, and we're not extreme in using this word. In California, against the person, crimes against the person, section 187, murder is defined this way. Murder is the unlawful killing of a human being or of a fetus with malice aforethought. After the definition, we find among the exceptions This section shall not apply to any person who commits an act which results in death of a fetus if the act was solicited, aided, embedded, or consented by the mother of the fetus. Okay, you guys track what I just said? Within the California Code of murder, okay, this is what judges use to say, okay, this was murder, is that murder is the unlawful killing of a human being or a fetus with malice forethought, okay? Now, they made an exception saying, but it's not murder if the mother consents to it, okay? Now, the only difference between legal abortion and punishable homicide is the consent of the mother in this case, okay? The consent of the mother determines whether it's murder or not. But one of those things that we need to realize, you remember what we were looking at last night, society says relativism? Based upon what your culture says, that's what determines what's right and wrong. This is a challenge to them because within our penal code, we have the right to say that pro-choice is murder based upon California law, which is the most liberal state in the country, probably. Okay, so you can say based off that really has a problem for society says relativism. You guys tracking with that? Okay. Second one is a scientific case. What you need to do when you're making a scientific case is you need to show that the unborn is alive. In many states, they require a ultrasound before abortion, and what happens is for a mother who sees their baby for the first time in an ultrasound and sees the baby's moving, they're like, whoa, that thing's alive. It's not just an organ in my body. It's something separate of me. There's a sense of this baby is alive. So if you can do that, that's a powerful thing. Show that the unborn is a separate individual from the mother, and show that the individual is human. So those are the main points that we want to make, why we are explaining to somebody that that they're separate, and that that baby is a separate human being. Okay, and there's a lot of cases that we can look at, and one of them is the philosophical case. When does a fetus become a human? Now, does it happen at viability, which is week 23, which is when they're able to survive outside the womb? Okay, some people will say that the baby becomes, or the fetus becomes a baby once they are human, once they're able to survive out the womb. But the reality is not all fetuses are the same, correct? Not all of them match up of when they can survive. And the reality is technology is pushing back the date of how much earlier a baby can survive out of the womb. So then the question does a human's value rely upon the progress of technology then? Does that make sense? Okay, so viability is not a really good argument because that is such a relative term, and it can be placed anywhere within the gestation period. Brain development starts at week 6. Now, death is considered the loss of brain activity, and people will say, shouldn't it be the same for birth, right? So as long as the baby doesn't have any brain activity, then therefore, if you kill the baby, then it's not alive yet. Does that make sense? Well, think about this. In birth, you will gain brain capability, right? At one point, you're going to have brain capability, your brain function is going to start working. Death, it never returns, okay? And also, what do you think about those people that are in comas? You know, sitting in hospitals who you don't know if they're ever going to have brain function again. Based upon this theory or worldview, it would be more justified to kill people in comas or let people go in comas than to have an abortion before 6 weeks. You guys tracking with that? Because a person in a coma has a less possibility of having brain development than that of a fetus growing, okay? Sentenced, 12 weeks, the baby can feel pain. Many people will say, well, once the baby can feel the pain of the abortion, at that point you shouldn't do it, and that's at 12 weeks. So after 12 weeks, it's a painful experience for the baby. You can actually see them. It's really sad experiencing that pain. But the reality is there are people who are paralyzed that can't feel pain. There are people with disorders that can't feel pain. Should we kill them? Does it make them less human because they can't feel pain? No, right? Person's still valuable even if they can't feel pain. Quickening. The first time the mother feels the baby, right? Many people will say that once the mother is aware of the baby, then that's when it becomes, a human. That's when it's valuable. Its human life is valuable. Well, the reality is they're drunk mothers that never feel the baby, right? And it changes for everyone where they start to feel quickening. So it's really a relative timeline as far as when does this baby become, or this fetus become a baby, okay? Or embryo, or whatever words they want to use. Okay. Now, another point that I want to make is this on the philosophical point, is a point that I thought was really interesting, is that a lot of people will say, well, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay, sorry. The next thing we need to do is show the important differences between the born and unborn. And this is a really good way to memorize how to talk to somebody from the pro-choice movement, is the acronym SLED, okay? SLED, S-L-E-D. The first question is size. Is someone less valuable because they are less developed? No, right? We have small people in our youth group, okay? They're not less valuable, all right? Joey's very small for being a man, and he is no less valuable than anybody else in the world, no matter what he tells himself. Being smaller, look at me. Sometimes when I turn to the side, people think I disappear, I am small. Smallness doesn't mean that you're less human. And if you say that you're less human because you're small, that's pretty offensive, actually. So a lot of people will say, well, the baby's small, or, it's within the womb, whatever that might be. So size. The next one is level of development. Is someone less valuable because they are less developed, right? Because you have a learning disorder, or you have Down syndrome, or you have anything like that, are you less valuable as a human because you're less developed? A baby is less developed, but they're not any less human, okay? Environment. Are you less human depending on your location? Brian's in Peru. Is he less human now that he's in Peru than when he was here in Borrego Springs? No, right? Just because the baby is inside the womb and outside the womb doesn't change anything. It really doesn't, okay? To me, that seems like such a logical point, that it doesn't matter where the baby is, whether it's in the womb or outside the womb, but people really see the difference. But there is really no difference, just like for an adult. It doesn't matter where you are, okay? The degree of dependency. Are you less human the more dependent you are, teenagers? No, right? Just because you still live with your parents doesn't make you less human, okay? Just makes you less developed. Makes you more dependent. Okay, so these are really good arguments, and it's really easy to remember, and you can just ask those questions. So you could say, is someone less valuable because of their size, their level of development, their environment, or degree of dependency, okay? The next point I think that's really good, which was the one I almost skipped ahead to, is ignorance equals abortion. Many old people will say when you're starting to talk about when does the baby become a human, people are like, well, we can't know. There's so many different views, so therefore we don't know. So therefore we should just allow people to have abortions. What? Okay. Just ignorance shouldn't equal abortion. Like I said, we can't know when life starts, so we shouldn't hinder a person's personal choice. And what you see in that is really the pro-life, pro-choice, right? You have two value systems that are competing, that one is holding higher than the other. For us as pro-life, we believe life is the most important thing, and that we will interject ourselves when life is in danger, while they think that choice is the bigger deal. And even when they don't care that life is in danger. Does that make sense? Okay, so this is really what this is getting at here. Ronald Reagan said, anyone who doesn't feel sure whether we are talking about a second human life should clearly give life the benefit of doubt. If you don't know whether a body is alive or dead, you should never bury it. Right? When we are unsure, we need to err on the side of caution. Right? If we're unsure of when a baby becomes a human, and even if you can't make a really good solid case that this is when, you just need to err on the side of caution. Okay? All right. So that is, I think, some really good arguments against the fact that a baby is human within the womb. But let's talk about something else, what I would like to call justified abortion. This is where people believe that abortion is murder, that you're murdering a life, killing a life, but there are times and places for abortions, meaning that there are justified cases for abortion, okay? Meaning two wrongs make a right, okay? Bringing these children into the world can be an economic drain. So the question is, when humans become expensive, then we kill them? Really, that's what it's saying if you reword it. When bringing these children into the world would be an economic drain. So we need to really investigate that. Corey, who's with us tonight, has posted some really neat articles on that point about how Planned Parenthood has purposely put themselves inside cities that are economically hurting and targeting those groups, which I think is a really sad statement. Women should not be forced to bring unwanted children into the world. When people become unwanted, may we kill them, right? You know how many times there's been where I don't want my children at points? You know what I mean? I'm like, oh, not for a long time, just like moments, okay? We're talking like split seconds. But, it doesn't make it right for me to like get rid of them, you know what I mean? Just because they're unwanted is not a right. The fact that a child is unwanted is a more commentary on the parents than the child. And if a fetus is a person, whether it is wanted or not, it's irrelevant to the rights to life. Does that make sense? So if you don't want the baby, it has no bearing on its right to life. And there are there's a lot of people that would love to adopt. And I'm just going to say this right now, and I don't think any of you girls will, but if you ever get pregnant and you don't want your baby, come talk to me and Megan. We'll either get you somebody or we will even talk about adopting ourselves, because that is something very important to us, okay? So that's one thing. So if you just don't want the baby because of some of those reasons, what about specific situations like people bring up all the time, and this is the most common pro-choice argument, which is rape, right? Women should not be forced to carry a baby resulting from rape. Why should the baby be punished for the father's crime is one question you can ask. But I'm going to say this right now. When people bring up things like rape, they're bringing up something that is horrible, it is an injustice, and only those who believe in absolute morality can call it such, okay? The second thing I want to make is this statement when it comes to rape, is that if I had my daughter that was raped and was pregnant, I would be feeling the same thing, to be honest. I'd be struggling with that decision. And I recognize that that is a hard decision for people to make, okay? I don't believe that having abortion makes it right, you know what I mean? I think that just throws so much more guilt on the victim on top of it. And that woman, now she feels like, great. They already feel like a lot of times like rape is their own fault. And then on top of that, now it's their fault of getting rid of the baby. So I think that's unwise. But I could understand maybe not wanting to see your rapist, face whatever. If, adoption is another option if a woman is not capable of caring for that baby. Okay. So I still think it falls under the same argument for babies unwanted. But I want to say this. One of the things when you're arguing points is that you need to make sure that people have their facts straight, okay? Many people will blow up this issue of rape and abortion, but we need to look at this. Okay, let's see if I have notes on it. Pregnancy by rape is really rare. About 4 women per state per year, okay, are in this case. If you go on pro-choice websites, they'll give you way higher numbers. But take some time, if you love research, and look at how they got their numbers, what they consider rape, all those kind of things. Now, just consider some of their numbers. They're talking over 4,000 women a year are getting pregnant with babies by rape, okay? That's, I think, the statistic. I don't have it in my notes, but when I had studied it. Consider this. Over 20,000 rapes happen every year. Statistically, we're looking at 10 women per state per year when he was talking about this issue of rape for birth from abortion. 85% of rape victims who become pregnant choose to carry the baby to term, okay? So those are some considerations. Now, I wish I had put it in my notes because I read it through this year and then I couldn't find it, but I read this really interesting article that a mathematician did. Okay, we're going to talk about sex a little bit right now, okay? So, women are only fertile at one point in the year, correct? Right? Or month, right? We're only fertile one time during the month. Women are only fertile during a certain part of their life, okay? There comes a time when they're no longer fertile, okay? And then a woman getting pregnant is highly dependent on if they want it or not, okay? And there's been studies of that, of how hard it is really on the physical side of it. If you look statistically about how many girls that are fertile, I'm not saying it, look it up. I can't remember what the number was, but I think it was 3 out of 4 women are on birth control at a time. I'm not saying, don't write that down. Look it up. I don't know what the statistic is. But if you do the math of the fact of girls that are on birth control, girls that have to be in their time of the month when they are raped, the fact that it's hard to get pregnant when you're not wanting it, all those things, mathematically, it would be impossible to have the amount of rapes that the pro-choice movement is saying, just if you were to do statistics on it. It's really interesting. Might be something interesting for you to run by with your statistic learning. So, what? You don't want to do that kind of math, yeah? So, and even if a woman gets pregnant, like I said, a lot of them choose to keep it to term. So, what am I trying to say here? Is when you are talking to a pro-choice person, they say, well, what about rape? You're saying that people and they're getting all worked up about it, say, well, how often does that really happen? There's thousands. Oh, really? Can you explain to me how there are thousands and how statistically that is even possible? Okay? Just running those things by you. Something you could do some more research on your own. All right. Modified pro-choice, or the pro-life cowardice is what I like to call it. Pro-life cowards or modified pro-choice. And this is the statement. I'm personally against abortion, but I don't believe in forcing my views on others. Okay? There's a lot of pro-life people in our country, but they also don't feel like they want to stand up for it because they don't like forcing their views on people. Greg Kokel said this. Let me see if I understand you. I said, you are convinced that abortion kills an innocent child, yet you think the law should allow women to do that to their own babies. Did I get that right? Do you follow that? Let me see if I understand you. You are convinced that abortion kills an innocent child, yet you think the law should allow women to do that to their own babies. Okay? That's what they're saying. Okay? The logic of the modified pro-choice position reduces to, I think it's wrong to kill my own children, but I don't think we should stop other people from killing theirs. It's basically what it's saying. If you don't like abortion, then don't have one. Saying, if you don't like abortion, don't have one, to those who are opposed to abortion is similar to telling abolitionists not to own slaves if they don't like slavery. Okay? It's the same thing, right? Also, another point to this is not taking a stand is taking a stand, right? Not taking a stand is taking a stand. Regarding Roe versus Wade, Imagine you're back in the 19th century and the court is confronted with the issue of enslaving African Americans. Suppose in the name of state neutering that it delivers the opinion that it takes no stand on the issue. On that basis, it allows white Americans to own blacks as property. The court may verbally deny taking any position on the issue, but its allowance of slavery is actually morally equivalent to taking a side. The African Americans are not human persons. Likewise, the court's verbal denial of taking a position on fetal personhood is contradicted by its conclusion that abortion is a fundamental constitutional right and that fetuses are not persons under the Constitution. You guys track with that? So for a court to say, okay, we can't determine if a baby is, or a fetus is a baby or is human within the womb, so we're not going to take a position. So we're just going to allow abortion. That is taking a stance, okay? Just like he related it to African American slaves in the 19th century. Did you guys track along with that? I posted that on my Tumblr, and this guy reblogged me, and he called me a racist from that statement. And I was like, well, how was I racist? And I'm like, I don't follow your logic. It was really interesting. I was like, obviously you didn't understand what the quote was saying. But anyway, I'm not saying that we should go back to slavery. What I'm saying is that if the courts were just to deny, we're just going to leave it up to the person. They're basically denying the personhood of African Americans in that way. So, not taking a stand is taking a stand. And if we don't take a stand on this, we are making a statement that we're just leaving people to their own opinions. Think of it this way. If the issue of murder came up, okay, and we said we're no longer going to imprison murderers because we want to give them free will, free choice, right? And we said we shouldn't infringe on anybody's free choice. By not standing up and taking a stand is taking a stand. It's allowing murder to be run rampant. So we as young people, more than any other, need to make a stand. And that stand usually comes out wrong. It seems like whenever we get charged up, people first get charged up about the pro-life thing, we go to an extreme and we hurt people in it. But instead we need to come alongside people in the process. Does that make sense? So if you get a girl that gets pregnant at your school and you start hearing she might have an abortion, don't go like slander her all over Facebook or send her private messages that are all harsh. Come alongside them and be like, is there anything I can do to help you through this? I know it's a really hard decision. You know, can I pray with you? Can we talk about this? You know, going through, if a girl is pregnant, going through SLED might not be the best idea, you know, necessarily, you know, unless they ask for it and invite that. But I think we need to take a stand. I think in making our voice heard in our government, for sure, we definitely need to do that. I think it's been long enough as a country that we've allowed abortion in our country. And the reality is that it is moving in the other direction. More people are becoming pro-life because of technology and because of science. And so we need to do something about that. We need to vote for people who are pro-life when you guys get the chance to vote. And you need to write to senators and congressmen and let your voice be heard on that issue. And don't be ashamed of it. And remember, might doesn't make right, but the reality is we're in the majority now, which makes it easier to stand up, right, for what you believe when you're in the majority. So I encourage you guys to stand up however you can in a godly way that God would call you to. Okay, question. Oh, one more thing. If you're taking notes, I want you to write this down. 180, okay, the 180 movie by Ray Comfort. Yeah, 180 movie by Ray Comfort. It's on YouTube. If you look it up, one of the best videos I've seen on making an argument for abortion, but against abortion. Okay. Any questions? Questions?